Have you noticed that in the last decade or so, that all of the systems upon which human life depends have been moving toward global presences? For example, transportation is becoming global. It's hard to find a vehicle that was made in the United States or in Japan or in Europe. The components all come from various places in the world. Telecommunications has certainly been spectacular in its integration of global technology, and groups like Microsoft are as large outside of the United States as they are in the United States. All of the systems, banking, many of the largest banks in the world have bought banks in different parts of the world, and the global financial system, or the financial system, is becoming global. Culture is global. The movies produced in one country become as popular in another country. We've watched how various genres that began in one particular country, I'm thinking, for example, of the martial arts genre that began primarily as a Taiwan phenomenon in Taiwan, has become a theme globally, as readily as the popular musicians and artists from Europe and the United States have become household names throughout the world. Italian opera singers are as popular in New York as they are in Rome or Milan. And various cultural icons, soccer stars from Great Britain, are as popular in Latin America as Latin American soccer stars are popular in Europe. Entertainment and sports have become global. What's going on? It's not the question of whether it's good or bad. It's an observation of fact. Things are becoming global. That's because long ago it was prophesied that a kingdom would arise on the earth that would oppress the whole earth. It would begin initially as the integration of various systems upon which human life depends, both for its existence and for its enrichment, and that those systems would eventually come together and form one global identity, from which no one can escape if one desires to live in a manner similar to how we have lived for generations. In a recent broadcast, we noted that Daniel spoke to us about this in a dream. In Daniel's dream, there were 4 great beasts. The first was like a lion, the second like a bear, the third like a leopard, and the fourth had 10 horns. And the interpretation that was given to Daniel was that these beasts, including the fourth, were kingdoms that would arise from the earth. These kingdoms then were typified by these very bizarre predatory beasts. We know that these do not represent a God-inspired view of human civilization. In fact, concurrent with the things God has been doing in human history, the enemy has had his maintained presence throughout human history. And so types of the enemy's control of human society in the form of kingdoms have always coexisted alongside the things that God has done. I might add, not always peacefully, but they nevertheless have been there alongside what God was doing. So, for example, just as we have had the kingdom of David and the Old Testament kingdoms of the Jews, which more or less represented what God was doing in the earth. Sometimes they did more so than at others, depending on the kings that ruled at the time. But we also had kingdoms such as Babylon and Egypt, and kingdoms such as those, Sodom, which always seem to carry the germ of this opposition to God. And here we're speaking about a spiritual connection, a spiritual undertow. Like with Israel, there also was a spiritual undertow. So whereas the things of God have been represented with peaceful and harmonious images, the things of the evil one have been represented in turbulent and predatory images. So the lion, the bear, and the leopard are predatory. And they're rolled forward into one final kingdom. And so in Revelation 13, the beast of Daniel, specifically identified as a kingdom, now surfaces with much greater detail. Daniel said that the beast had 10 horns. Revelation, and John, writing in the Revelation, says, I saw a beast that came up out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads. So he adds 7 heads. We saw that because of the absolute connection between the first 3 kingdoms and this fourth, by both Daniel and John, that you have the same kingdom. The person who says, you see, the beast of Revelation is different because it refers first to it as having 7 heads and 10 horns. The 7 heads being a detail that Daniel doesn't speak to. And then it's only one beast, whereas Daniel spoke of 4. Those observations, however, collapse in light of the statement here in Revelation 13 that John makes when he says, the beast I saw, this one with 7 heads and 10 horns, the beast I saw resembled a leopard that had the feet like that of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. So here are the 3 predecessors. But you will note that the order is reversed. John sees first the lion, then the bear, then the leopard, then the 10-horned beast. Daniel, that is, saw them in that order. John sees them as first the beast of 7 heads and 10 horns, and then he sees its resemblance to the leopard, the bear, and the lion. But the order of John is the reverse of the order of Daniel. And that's simple enough. Daniel is looking prospectively into history, and from his moment in history, none of these kingdoms has arisen. John is looking back into history, and 3 of these kingdoms have already risen and fallen. The one that is yet to come is the global one. Because you have the identical beast referenced in both Daniel 7 and Revelation 13, the explanation given to Daniel applies just as readily to the one in the Revelation as it does to the one in Daniel. So in Daniel, we are specifically told that the beast is a kingdom, together with all the other 3, that they're all kingdoms. Therefore, that understanding is just as applicable because it's the identical beast that John speaks to in the Revelation. Now, John gives us all these fascinating details. So, for example, he tells us the dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. Well, we know who the dragon was because it specifically tells us in the preceding chapter, chapter 12 of the Revelation, it says that the dragon is The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. That's who the dragon is, the devil or Satan. So when it says the dragon gave the beast his power, his throne and great authority, then the question is, whose kingdom is this kingdom that's of 7 heads and 10 horns? Well, it is operated by the power and the authority of Satan. So it is Satan's kingdom. You can't argue with those interpretations because they're self-explanatory. The dragon, who is the devil or Satan, gives the beast, which is a kingdom, his power, his throne, and great authority. Substitute here. The dragon is Satan, so Satan gives this beast his kingdom, his throne, and great authority. The beast to which he gives kingdom, throne, and authority is a kingdom. Daniel says that. So what do we have in plain language? In plain language, this global kingdom is utterly supported, sustained, and exists for the purposes of Satan, the one who comes to the earth to wage war against the saints using this kingdom. And we're not left in doubt as to its intentions. The middle of verse 3 says, the whole world was astonished and followed the beast. What did Daniel say? That he oppressed and crushed the whole earth and devoured it. And this says the whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshiped the dragon. Who is the dragon? Satan. Men worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. See, they don't worship the beast. They worship the dragon, who is Satan, who had given his power to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast who can make war against him? In what sense then do they worship the beast? They put their trust in what this global kingdom can deliver. And they say, who can make war against him? Have you noticed what has happened to the world since September the 11th? Have you been paying attention? After September the 11th, the proudest nation on the face of the earth, the one whose pride was in maintaining its national sovereignty, we the people, it has become under the rule of a conservative, one of the most conservative presidents in a long time, with a legal system that at one point was presided over by an attorney general who was known to be a conservative. Under this arrangement, this nation now leads the world in its search for global security. Is that not the fact? Are those not the facts? We are the ones pushing the world to come up with global security. Nations like Great Britain have experienced the scourge of terrorism, and they were on board early. But nations as reluctant as France, in their recent encounters with the terrors of a population on a rampage, they have joined the parade. Germany, which also opposed this direction, has experienced a regime change. And its present prime minister, or president, has decided that cooperating with the West, especially on the matter of global security, is a top priority. The Russians are cooperating with the United States and with the allies of NATO to form a global security umbrella. What has happened? In the aftermath of September the 11th, all of the nations of the world, from Australia to the northern states of Norway and Sweden, are obsessed with the idea of being secure. The United States, Mexico, all these countries want to find ways to permit humans to travel back and forth, but not at the expense of their national securities. A huge scandal is brewing in the United States at the moment over domestic spying, a thing that would have dethroned presidents in the past. But now it's being weighed to see if this is a good thing or bad thing. The thing that is being offered is we need security. This says, who can make war against the beast? This whole movement is toward finding global security. The aftermath of September the 11th has introduced to the earth a consciousness of the need for national securities that's formulating not along the borders of nations, but in the whole globe. Now, that means you're not trying to create primarily border security. You're trying to suppress threats to the security of any nation before those threats may become a reality on the shores or within the borders of a particular country. I'm not passing on the question of whether or not this is good or bad. I'm not even asking the question of whether or not there is an alternative. I'm just saying, have you noticed how the beast has arisen? And yet these things were prophesied thousands of years ago. Isn't that astonishing? All of that from a dream, prophesying the emergence of things today. Now, here is the subtext underneath all of this. Don't for a moment think that the security of nations as the above ground text is now a godly thing, a God-inspired thing. No, this is how the net is being set up. Because Satan's kingdom is a systemic kingdom. It is rooted not in geographies, but in systems. Underneath it all, the beast was given a mouth. You remember that little horn? The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise his authority for 42 months. 42 months in terms of years is 3.5 years exactly. And in terms of symbolic reference in the Old Testament, it's time, times, and half a time, 3.5 years. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. Why, of course, because the ones who now live in heaven, the angels, are the ones who didn't go with them in their rebellion. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. Did you see that? In the Old Testament, Daniel said the same thing. Or it was said to Daniel that he will make war against the saints. And we raised the question then, who are the saints? The one advising Daniel as to the meaning of his vision was the one saying that the saints will be overcome for time, times, and half a time. We have exactly the same reference here in the New Testament. And now the one writing this is John, the Apostle John. Do you think John knows who the saints are? Of course John knows who the saints are. He's one of them. And at this point in his life, he's probably the most known of the saints. It's to Christians, believers in Jesus Christ, whether they be Jew or Gentile. The intent of the evil one through this kingdom that he has created is to so demand loyalty to its protocols that if you fail to swear loyalty, you're excluded. You are the enemy of the one state. This will go on to say that you can't buy or sell unless you receive the mark of the beast. And I'm fascinated by the comparison between the mark of the beast and the seal of God that's given into the foreheads of those who trust God. These references are fascinating. A mark versus a seal. What is a seal? A seal is typically the imprint of a signet ring, signifying that one is under the authority of the one who made the impression in the wax. So when you have the seal of God upon your forehead, it means that you're under the authority of God. He protects you. A mark, by contrast, is a brand. It's the way that you would indicate that you owned a slave. You'd put your mark on the slave. He wasn't under your authority as one protected by your authority. He's one you own. In order to survive this global net that the evil one is setting up, you have to come under his rule. If you like, you have to come under his ownership. He will own you as a slave. The alternative is to receive the seal of the Lord upon your forehead, indicating that you're under his protection, under his rule, under his government. If he cannot protect you, then you cannot be protected. Now, the first thing that Jesus said would happen in the days leading to the end of the age, the beginnings of sorrows, is many false Christs will appear. This tells us that a little horn arises on the head of this beast, this global kingdom. And this horn becomes the spokesman for everything that the kingdom is about. Let me show you something else about this kingdom, if I can. I'd like for us to take a look at Revelation 17 at verse 12. Revelation 17:12. This is about the responsibility of these 10 kings. There were 10 kings, 10 horns, each horn representing a king. These 10 kings arise, and then another king comes up, typified by the little horn. He overthrows 3 of the 10, 3 of the horns that are there. And then he begins to assume the role of speaking for the beast. Here's an interesting and fascinating source. Revelation 17:12. It says, verse 12, "The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them, because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers." That's fascinating. That is stunning, because it tells us that these kings are not geographic kings. That is, they do not rule over certain geography. They will wait to get their authority. And when they do, they'll hold their authority just long enough for the evil one to arise and to bring it all together. You've got to see how this unfolds, because this is the scheme. The kingdom of Satan is this beast of 7 heads and 10 horns, because he gives the kingdom the power of its existence, its throne, and its great authority. Now the question is, what power does he give it? What is the scheme that formulates this kingdom? Why does he make it this way? Why does he go after encircling the whole earth, gathering in everything upon which human life depends? This beast crushes and devours the whole earth. Why is that his strategy? Why does he want to do it that way? Why does he not simply continue to deceive the nations in some sort of subterfuge? He seems to come up now and is unbridled in his use of power. And once he gains power, he's not bashful in blaspheming God, blaspheming the angels in heaven and on the earth, in an uncompromising way, all-out war against the saints. And his method of engaging the saints is to exclude them unless they submit to his rule, to absolutely push them away. You see, he's not going to come around insisting that you take the mark. You'll have to opt in to the system, because there will be no other game in town. Nobody's going to deceive anyone about, taking the mark on the sly. It'll be open and public. This is a terrible time, and you need to understand these things that we've laid out. I hope that you will continue to study with me as we see the unfolding of the whole plan. I'm Sam Solen. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Broken body, broken bread, blood turned wine, life for the dead. Surrender to Jesus your thoughts and your cares. Come walk with us and meet Jesus here. Broken body, broken bread, blood turned wine, life for...
Hi, I'm Sam Solen. I'm the host of the preceding program. We bring you these messages to encourage you in your walk with God. If you'd like a copy of this message, you may obtain it in one of 2 ways. You may obtain it by writing to me at the address on the screen, indicating what program that you desire, or the alternative is to visit our website at www.solen.com. You may download it for free. Either way, it's without cost to you, so feel free to write. If you'd like to know what's going on in the ministry, sign up on the website for our newsletter. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye-bye.